Okay, so 2026 might seem like an age away, but actually we're just 2 years away from possibly the biggest year in Formula One history. You might not have heard, but there are some huge changes being brought into Formula One for 2026 that will change up the pecking order. Let's take a look at the massive changes being brought into the sport and the reasons why the FIA are bringing in such a huge number of changes. If you've been keeping a track of F1 news over the past 12 months, you might have noticed that there have been a lot of stories about 2026. That is for good reason. The FIA has decided that 2026 will be the year in which the sport brings in a huge number of different changes that will affect the racing, the engines, and the aerodynamics. There is not really any reason for 2026 being the major year for changes in the sport. It just seems like that is the year chosen by the FIA. It is also the end of the current regulations, which means that the sport needs new guidelines pretty soon anyway. So what are the changes that are being brought into the sport? The headline changes. The headlines, when taking a look at what's going to be different about F1 cars in 2026, is that they should be smaller, use more electrical power, and be able to race closer together. Over the last decade, Formula One cars have gotten a lot bigger. They are now bigger than ever before, which might seem like a good thing, but it makes the racing slightly more difficult, and so the changes being brought in for 2026 should help this. F1 engines will be more focused on electric energy. As a whole, the cars will be smaller and lighter, with the FIA tightening the rules around how much the cars are allowed to weigh. This should help enable closer racing, making the championship more exciting for viewers. Power unit changes. The most significant out of the changes being brought into the sport is to do with the power unit. One of the things that Formula One is trying to change is the sport's reputation as being bad for the environment. While it is really all of the moving trucks and support vehicles which are causing the majority of pollution, the sport has decided to make changes to the cars. The solution for Formula One has always been to rely on more electrical power. While Formula One is not trying to turn into Formula E, they are trying to integrate more of the engine's functions into electrical-based. In fact, the engines in 2026 will feature 3 times as much electrical power. The MGU-K will almost triple the amount of power it produces compared to the current hybrid cars that we have in the sport. This means that not only will more electrical energy be used, but there will also be more braking energy collected instead of being wasted. The new MGU-Ks will produce around 350 kilowatts in 2026. That higher production of electrical power also leads to the cars being more powerful. Power units will continue to produce over 1,000 horsepower just as they do now. So don't expect the new 2026 cars to look any slower than the current ones. It's not just the power and the electrical units that'll be different about these 2026 cars though. Using sustainable fuel. Formula One has always been seen as the forefront of technical development in cars. Well, one of the groundbreaking things that will be new about the cars in 2026 is that they will run on fully sustainable fuels. The sport has funded extensive research into the possibility of using sustainable fuels for Formula One cars. That research seems to have been worth it because starting in 2026, Formula One cars will no longer be burning any fossil fuels, instead using a fully sustainable fuel. The fuel itself should also be more efficient. One of the things the sport has been really focusing on is trying to reduce the amount of fuel that each of the cars burn. Back in 2013, around 160 kilograms of fuel was used in a race by each car. That should be all the way down to 70 kilograms in 2026. It's an impressive move for Formula One, and it's also good to see that all of the money that F1 has put into sustainable fuel research was worth it. This could help sustainable fuel development in the wider world. The changes to the engines will also create a new noise. F1 fans have been dying for a louder noise from the engines, with the V8 and V12 eras being known for the incredible sound of the cars. Maybe these moves could make the cars sound even better. The move towards sustainability has still been criticized, as the cars are not really what is so bad for the environment. It's the massive number of support vehicles and the traveling involved in Formula One. The sport is not doing as much about that, so we could see some more changes coming soon before 2026. Chassis changes. While the engine changes might have been the headline, there are also going to be some pretty significant chassis and aerodynamic changes that are going to make the cars look very different. In terms of the chassis, the cars will be shorter, lighter, and narrower. For a long time, Formula One cars have been getting bigger. This might seem like a good thing because it's also coincided with the cars becoming more powerful, but it's often made overtaking difficult, particularly on street circuits where there is little space. Street circuits are starting to become a little bit boring, and so the sport has focused on making the cars lighter and smaller. By making them just slightly smaller, it should be a lot easier for overtakes to happen without the help of DRS, so we should be seeing more overtakes in tight spaces from 2026 onwards. The cars should also be lighter by around 40 to 50 kilograms. This is at least a target for the sport, with it seeming slightly more likely for the cars to be 20 kilograms lighter in 2026 than they are now. This should help make the cars even faster in a straight line. However, there is also some significant changes which will make the cars slower around the corners. Losing downforce. The aerodynamic changes might be the biggest difference you notice in 2026. Due to the changes in the chassis and the car design, F1 cars will be losing 40% of their downforce heading into 2026. That is a huge figure which will have massive implications on each team. For one thing, there will be a rush in 2026 for teams to regain some of the aerodynamic force that they lost. You might notice the cars looking a bit slower through the corners in the first few races of 2026. It could have massive implications on high downforce circuits like Hungary. This is not all bad, however, as this should also allow the cars to be faster in a straight line. With less downforce, we should be seeing track time records set in places like Austria, Bahrain, and Canada. Teams will have to find a balance in between regaining downforce and maintaining a high top speed. The aerodynamic changes will also have a major effect on the opportunity to overtake. Dirty air has become a major talking point in Formula 1 over the last few years. It's become much harder for cars to follow closely behind others, making overtakes almost impossible without the help of DRS. F1 does not want to be solely reliant on the use of DRS for overtakes. The aerodynamic changes should create less dirty air. With less turbulent air, it should be easier for cars to follow closely behind each other and produce more exciting overtakes. Cost cutting. All of these changes might seem extremely expensive, but the sport is also committed to bring down costs. An engine-specific cost cap will be put in place from 2026, while expensive systems like the MGU-H will be banned completely. This should help to bring the costs down of the sport for not only the constructors, but the engine manufacturers as well. The number of hours that can be put into running the engine dyno will also be reduced. And all of these measures should help to bring down the costs while still encouraging creativity and innovation in the sport. So as you can see, there are a lot of changes happening to the sport in 2026. We should be seeing Formula 1 become more environmentally friendly, cost-effective, and more exciting to watch. But what do you think about the F1 changes for 2026? Why not put your thoughts in the comments down below? And while you're down there, hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.